Now is Chris O'Leary, former director of hostage rescue and recovery for the U.S. government. And Chris, as we noted at the top of the segment, and you heard there from Hallie, there is this new effort to get these hostage talks renewed. How significant of a development do you find it to be that the U.S., Israel, and Qatar are at least back in the same room at this point?
Well, I think it's great, and I think it's overdue, but it took, Prime Minister Netanyahu pushing for it, or at least giving the green light to allow it to happen. Both the Qataris and the United States have been supportive of it the entire time, as has the director of Mossad. What's critical now is to get Hamas back to the table, and it's going to take some doing to get them there, because hostage taking is an asymmetric tactic, and right now it's working, and it's working because Israel's strategy for countering terrorism and rescuing the hostages is flawed.
Yeah. What effect do you think the killing of those 3 hostages by the IDF has on all of this? I can't imagine it does anything other than push towards further negotiations. Well,
it's just, unfortunately, a tragic example of, how, Israel is failing its people. The approach that they've taken from the beginning on not doing a counterterrorism approach, not having intelligence-driven missions, and instead doing this all-out urban warfare has brought us to this situation where you have frontline Israeli troops opening fire on unarmed civilians that unfortunately happen to turn out to be their own people as well.
Yeah. Last time we had you on, we talked about this idea that Hamas uses the hostages as currency. Previously, Israel released Palestinian prisoners at about a 3-to-1 ratio to get hostages home. For lack of a better way to describe it, does the cost of returning hostages go up in a second ceasefire if there is one?
I think Hamas is I think you're hitting the nail on the head. I think Hamas is in the position to ask for the release of every Palestinian prisoner at this point. And that's ultimately what their goal was anyway. There's roughly, 7,000 plus Palestinian detainees in Israeli custody, and that's what they're looking to do, get them all released and to survive this war, which, the recent evidence of the expansive tunnel system indicates that they are likely hiding below ground, and that the effects of all the kinetic strikes probably are limited on Hamas's enterprise.
What do we know now differently than we did during the last ceasefire, the idea that hostages might be exchanged, right? We have hostages who've been out now, who've told us things like that they were guarded 24/7 around the clock while they were in custody of Hamas. How does all that change the way the Israeli government might approach future negotiations?
Yeah, so unfortunately, a lot of the intelligence that was likely gleaned from the released hostages before is probably overcome by events. It's stale at this point, although some of it might still be viable. But getting some additional releases would be helpful to paint a picture on the condition of the hostages now, on their possible locations, who might be holding them. But also remember, not all of these hostages were being held by Hamas either, and that was some of the complexity of getting all of them released. We are negotiating with Hamas, but not with Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Right. And, that's one of the challenges. And the last thing is the Palestinian Islamic Jihad hostages are likely being held above ground. Hamas isn't opening up these tunnels for the safety and security of Pidge.
Which just increases the likelihood that those folks are going to be in danger every day this war goes on. Chris O'Leary, we have to leave it there. Thank you very much for sharing your expertise with us.